Every gamer has a backlog. I don't know about you, but my backlog's big and it keeps getting bigger. That's because, Jesus Christ, they just keep releasing good games that I want to play. I'm sure many of you have games on your backlog that are considered necessary reading when it comes to being a capital G gamer. At least one that has any nerd cred. You know, the kind of games like Elden Ring, Breath of the Wild, hell, even Minecraft. When you talk to someone who says they play video games, you tend to just assume they've played Minecraft at some point, right? Now, keep that in mind. Assume someone, maybe you don't have to assume, maybe this is true for you, but assume for a moment someone hasn't played The Witcher 3. They've kept hearing about it for the better part of the last decade, how it's one of the greatest RPGs of all time. They've heard about how the narrative, gameplay, and open world all mix together to make one of the best game experiences you can have. They remember the hype associated with The Witcher show and everyone talking about Henry Cavill's portrayal of the iconic character of Geralt. The memes, the sheer hype around this game, it was on your backlog for weeks, then months, then years, and finally you think, sweet, this is the time to finally play it. You boot it up, play it for about an hour or two, and you think to yourself, this is kind of mid. There's not much worse in this world than getting all excited for an upcoming release, getting lost in the hype and loading it up the second it releases, only to realize the game's shit. Maybe the only thing worse is having a game that's so widely discussed on your backlog for ages, having that weight on you that you're missing out for so long, only to then play it and realize you don't even like it. It's the same letdown, except this time you feel like it wasn't the games industry that was lying to you, it was your fellow gamer. Not me though, I'd never lie to you. That's why I want to tell you about how great this video's sponsor is, Raid Shadow Legends. I've looked over two of the most popular backlog management websites, howlongtobeat.com and Backlogged, and looked at each site's top 10 most backlogged games. It looks something like this. So let's collate this together, removing any duplicates and removing games that are in my own backlog that I haven't gotten to yet. And lastly, remove The Witcher 2 and Tomb Raider 2013 because frankly, I don't care and I don't really want to play them. What we have left are games that are heavily backlogged. Chances are at least one of these games are on your backlog, and I've played them through and I can tell you whether these games are worth the hype, or just a flat out waste of your time. Spoiler alert, even the worst one on this list is still pretty good. Look, they're the most backlogged games of all time, the backlog GOATs. Obviously they're not going to be bad, I just want to talk about them and tell you what to expect and maybe some advice on how long to give it a chance before deciding it's not for you and moving on. You know, like they don't make it onto this list unless people want to play them, and lots of people don't want to play them unless lots of people have played them and they say it's really good. Anyway, starting the list we have Borderlands 2.
Light the fuses, bitches!
Initially, I thought this was a really odd inclusion, and I was surprised so many people have this game backlogged. It's not a bad game by any means. In fact, it's a lot of fun, but I never really considered it a must-play title like so many others on this list. That was until I thought about it some more. I reminisced about my time on Pandora and I realized Borderlands 2 really does stand out as a memorable game, especially for the time that it came out. It mixes first-person shooter action with RPG progression, meaning that it's not just going from point A to point B shooting everything in sight. I mean, it does still have that too, but we're also leveling up, choosing skills from skill trees, and constantly swapping gear in and out in search of the next absurd weapon drop. Speaking of weapon drops, the Borderlands series often sells itself on its loot system. Guns are procedurally generated, meaning that at least according to the marketing, millions of combinations are possible. Some might be another pistol with some higher numbers on it, but others are completely different, like a shotgun that fires rockets or a sniper rifle that sets enemies on fire. It makes every playthrough feel unique, because even if you're running the same missions, the loadouts you're carrying are different every time. Speaking of replayability, each of the Vault Hunters you can play as has a totally unique play style. They each have their own skill trees and their own niches, whether that's Zero's stealth and critical hit focus or Salvador's crazy dual wielding. Every character approaches fights differently, but that's just playing as one Vault Hunter. What if we throw multiple into the mix? The campaign is fun solo, but in co-op it gets even better. It gets even more chaotic, the fight difficulty also scaling with the number of players, with up to 4 of you playing at the same time. If you have a buddy or two to play this with, you owe it to yourself to do it. But if you don't let that be the reason you never start it. The single player is still excellent.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's cute that y'all think you're the heroes of this little adventure, but you're not.
Borderlands 2 also gives us one of gaming's most memorable villains in Handsome Jack. He's charming, funny, and utterly hateable.
I guess you just killed yourself.
And the supporting cast is just as good. Sir Hammerlock, Tiny Tina, the game is stacked full of memorable NPCs. If you played the first Borderlands, the return of the original Vault Hunters as NPCs is a great callback, but even if you didn't, the game makes their importance obvious without ever making you feel lost. Another thing that gives the game so much personality is its bosses. Every major fight kicks off with a splash screen introducing them, their name, some ridiculous tagline, and a snapshot of what kind of lunatic you're about to face. It's such a small thing, but it instantly makes every boss encounter feel memorable. Pandora itself feels more connected and alive than it did in the first game. Regions flow into each other in ways that make sense. You're not just hopping between empty zones. Missions string together naturally, with side quests often having their own little narratives, and sometimes these can be genuinely hilarious. Take an early example with the name game. This has Sir Hammerlock have you hunting bullymongs as he tries to come up with a better name for them. He tries out Primal Beast, but the publisher hated it, so instead he changes them to Ferrovores, before finding out that that name is actually trademarked. Frustrated, he gives up and decides to just call them Boner Farts, cause who cares?
You know what? Boner fart. All of the bets right, we're calling them boner farts now.
Only to find out he can't use that name either. So after all that messing around, they just anticlimactically remain as bullymongs. Mechanically, one of my favorite features is the fight for your life, which is this second wind mechanic that lets you keep playing if you can kill an enemy before you bleed out. It makes every fight feel tense, since even a doomed battle can flip in your favor if you clutch out one last kill. And I didn't even mention the art style. The cel-shaded look goes a long way to make the game still hold up today. It never looks as dated as so many other games from 2012 do. If there's one Borderlands game to play, it probably is this one. The story's great, the characters are memorable, the humor, while admittedly hit and miss, lands more often than it doesn't. And it mostly avoids the oversaturation of reference humor that the later games fall victim to. And that's the thing, Borderlands 2 doesn't demand a 50-hour investment just to figure out if it's worth your time. Give it an hour or two. If absolutely nothing clicks, okay, fair enough, move on. But for most people, something about this game will click with them. And once it does, you're in for one of the most fun, chaotic, and just plain entertaining FPS campaigns out there. The next game I need to talk about is Baldur's Gate 3. And where do you even start with the 2023 Game of the Year? I could almost make the whole video just about this game. If you've played Dungeons & Dragons before, this is a no-brainer. It's easily the best translation of the tabletop experience into a video game that I've ever seen. The way it handles choice, dice rolls, and character freedom is about as close as the real thing as you can get. You'd just about expect the game to ask you for snacks in between turns. The combat is incredible, and honestly, it's crazy how intuitive it is considering how they had to adapt the D&D rule set into a digital game. Even if you've never rolled a d20 in your life, this is still a fantastic turn-based tactics game with a ton of divergent gameplay. You're not just trading hits between units until someone's health bar hits 0, the battlefield around you matters. High ground, cover, environmental hazards, you can grease a pathway and then light it on fire, block a doorway with some summoned vines, shove someone into a bottomless pit. There's so many decisions for you to make each turn, and the game constantly rewards your creativity, so often leading to those, oh shit, you can do that moments? Player choice is in the heart of Baldur's Gate 3. Decisions ripple outward in ways you don't always see coming. Take Act 1. You might protect the Druid Grove, destroy it, betray one side, betray both sides, and how you do it can play out in a dozen different ways. The game never forces you into a right answer, but it will make you live with the consequences of what you do. And then there's the exploration. This is one of those games where wandering off the main path never feels like a waste of time. Every map is crammed with secrets, hidden loot, little stories waiting to be found. Even the simplest, smallest side quest is a joy to do, whether it's helping a random NPC with a mundane problem they're facing, or stumbling into a chain of events that spiral into something bigger. It's that feeling of I'll just check over that hill that turns into an entire evening of adventures you didn't even plan for. And the companions? Every party member feels like the main character of their own story. You can recruit them and watch their stories unfold, or you can be them as an origin character, seeing the events of the games from their perspective. This game is also built for replayability. There's different classes, different races, different choices, different companions, even different playstyles can change the experience so much that the second run doesn't feel like a rerun of the same game. Plus, like Borderlands 2, this game can be played through co-op, and it's such an amazing experience. Playing through Honor Mode, which is like this high difficulty with permadeath, with friends was one of the most intense, hilarious, unforgettable gaming experiences I've ever had. I also have to mention the presentation. Everything is fully voiced and their performances are fantastic. Every companion, villain, random NPC feels distinct. Even the narrator brings moments to life, describing your actions and their consequences in a way that makes the smallest interaction feel important. Something as simple as talking to a squirrel can be delivered like a scene from a fantasy epic, right up until, well...
You claim victory over the squirrel.
Now, I get it, this is a massive game. We're talking like 80 plus hours on a first playthrough. And as an adult, hearing a game that will take me more than 20 to 30 hours can be intimidating. That's weeks, if not months of playtime. But here's the thing, you don't have to commit to all of it right away. Just give it a few hours. If it doesn't click, no harm done. But if it does, you won't be counting hours anymore. You'll just be living in this world until the credits eventually roll. Honestly, it's easily one of my favorite games of all time. I cannot recommend it enough. Next on the list is Hades. Supergiant Games has always nailed presentation, and Hades is no exception. The art style is gorgeous, and the character designs are striking, and every screen just feels alive with color and motion. The music deserves its own shout out too. Darren Korb's soundtrack somehow manages to both be epic and atmospheric at the same time. Whether it's heavy riffs that kick in mid-fight, or more subtle tracks that play while you're at the back of House of Hades, it's an absolute treat. But it's not just about looking and sounding great, the design is also clean. Take the boons, for example. Each one is color-coded and tied to a different Olympian, and they all feel distinct. Picking a Zeus boon for a chain lightning build feels completely different from going with Dionysus and poisoning enemies with Hangover, or Poseidon with all his knockback effects. Even on your 100th run, you'll still likely be discovering new combinations and synergies. That's the beauty of Hades. The variance between runs keeps it addictive. You pick your weapon, which already shifts your playstyle considerably, then the gods pile on with randomized boons that push your run in new directions. And even if you die early, it never feels like a waste of time. Every run gives you something: resources for upgrades, progress in relationships, or even just the satisfaction of learning and improving. And speaking of relationships, the storytelling in Hades is top notch. The cast of characters is huge and every one of them is dripping with personality. The way the game folds the roguelike loop into the storytelling is genius. You're not just running dungeons endlessly for no reason. You're Zagreus trying again and again to escape the underworld. The heart of it all is his desire to leave and find his mother, and his father standing in the way. Hades isn't portrayed as a one-dimensional villain though. He's strict, he's harsh, but he's also a dad doing what he thinks is a must. And when you fail and reappear back home, he's just sitting there, same as always, like the two of you are stuck cohabitating in this weird, passive-aggressive domestic setup. It's funny, but also really human. The game is loaded with references to Greek mythology, and whether you catch all of them or you only recognize the big names, it's always a joy to see how Supergiant interprets these figures. Add to that the writing, which is constantly sharp and witty, and you've got a game that's as much fun to listen to as it is to play. And the gameplay loop, I mean, look, I'm a sucker for roguelikes already, but this might be the cleanest one out there. Tight combat, great build variety, and that just one more run feeling that makes hours disappear. It's addictive without ever feeling unfair, and it always makes sure you're progressing. Even runs that end embarrassingly fast give you something to carry forward. The beauty of Hades is that trying it isn't really a commitment at all. Runs are short, progression always moves forward, and you'll know pretty quickly if it's your thing. Either it grabs you with its just one more run energy, or it doesn't. And that's fine, but if it does grab you, don't be surprised if 5 hours vanish in what feels like 5 minutes. Next up is Portal 2, and I'll be honest, it's kind of wild to me that this is still one of the most backlogged games ever. Not because it's some weird niche cult hit, but because it's Portal 2. This is one of those games that feels like everyone should have played it already. And if you haven't, you're genuinely missing out on one of the most creative and entertaining puzzle games ever made. At its core, it's a first-person puzzle platformer, but there's really nothing else quite like it. The original Portal was already brilliant, but Portal 2 takes that foundation and builds on it in every way. The puzzles are bigger, the story goes deeper, and the whole presentation is sharper. It's a sequel that doesn't just repeat the same ideas, it actually justifies itself as something new and essential. The characters are a big reason why. GLaDOS was already iconic, but here her role expands in really surprising ways that add depth to her beyond just being a sarcastic evil AI. And then you've got Wheatley, who's instantly just as memorable. Between the two of them, you get some of the funniest, sharpest writing in any video game.
Let there be light. That's, God. I was quoting God.
And the voice acting completely nails it. I couldn't even tell you which one of them is more entertaining because they're both perfect in their own ways. But it's not just the writing, the actual puzzles are so well designed. Every chamber is satisfying to solve, hitting that perfect balance between I feel smart for figuring this out and I can actually pull this off without fighting the controls. That's a rare thing for puzzle games because so often there's that frustrating gap between knowing the solution and then actually executing it. Portal 2 seems to just smooth that out. And while you're doing all of this, the game keeps layering on more and more mechanics, but never in a way that feels overwhelming. Each new element, whether it's like the gels or light bridges or excursion funnels, they slot perfectly into the puzzle language the game has already taught you. It's one of those, oh wow, they just thought of everything experiences. On top of that, Portal 2 has a surprisingly great story. Without spoiling too much, it digs into the world of Aperture Science in ways the first game only hinted at, while also fleshing out its characters in unexpected ways. It's funny, clever, and way more atmospheric than you'd think a game about portals needs to be. And then just when you think you're done, you discover there's an entire co-op campaign, completely separate from the single-player story, with its own puzzles and mechanics designed specifically for 2 players. It's honestly one of the best co-op games out there, as long as you and your partner can keep the yelling to a minimum. Which brings me to my theory on why it's stuck on so many backlogs. I reckon a lot of people have finished the single player but have left it on the list because they were waiting for the right time to play co-op with a friend. And maybe that time never came. If that's you, don't stress. The single player is a complete, satisfying experience on its own, and one of the best games ever made. You don't need to keep it hanging over your head just for co-op. Treat it as a bonus, not a barrier. The best part? It's short. The single player story is under 10 hours, so this isn't one of those massive RPGs you have to carve out a month for. You'll know within the first hour or so if it's clicking with you. And if it does, you're in for one of the smartest, funniest, most satisfying games ever made. And if it doesn't, I mean, fair enough, to each their own, but at least you can say you tried it. Honestly, there's a reason Portal 2 still gets talked about more than a decade later. It's not just one of the best puzzle games ever made, it's one of the best games, period. If it's been sitting on your backlog, move it up the list. You won't regret it. Elden Ring is a tricky one to talk about because it's decidedly not for everyone. By their very nature, FromSoft games are exclusionary. No difficulty options, extremely punishing bosses, and an expectation that you'll learn by failing over and over again. It's a great experience, but one that will exclude some players. And yet it's also one of the most talked about games of the 2020s, a Game of the Year winner and dominated the conversation for months. No wonder it's so common to see it on backlogs. A lot of that backlog guilt comes down to difficulty. Many people get stuck on a boss, drop it, and never come back, leaving it in backlog purgatory. The solution depends on the person. For some, it's about jumping back in, pushing through, and get good. Others, it's recognizing when to let go. If you're not enjoying yourself, you don't need to feel guilty for moving on. But if you do stick with it, understand that Elden Ring isn't a game you can try in an hour or two. Especially if it's your first Souls-like, you'll hit walls that feel impossible, and then come back 10 attempts later and finally conquer them. That loop of frustration into triumph is what makes these games so intoxicating. And Elden Ring adapts the Souls-like DNA into an open-world game in a way that I would have thought impossible, and yet it works. The sheer freedom of picking a direction and uncovering something new makes exploration thrilling. And for all the problems I have with some of the bosses, the highs are among FromSoft's best. Take General Radahn for example. He's less the traditional Souls boss and more of like an MMO raid encounter, summoning NPC allies, dodging a literal meteor crash coming down from orbit, coordinating the chaos. It's completely different from the usual duel of blades, and yet it works. The build variety only adds to that replayability. You could use a big sword, a small sword, a poking sword, a magic sword, maybe finger swords, ranged sword, or even no sword. The options are near endless, and that makes every run feel fresh. And exploration isn't just about loot or enemies. The environments themselves are telling stories. Whole cities buried underground, ruins swallowed by swamps, corpses frozen in battle positions. The lands between is constantly whispering what happened here if you're paying attention. That's what makes the act of discovery so powerful. You're not just finding treasure, you're piecing together a world. All of this works because the game feel is so tight. The controls are responsive, movement is snappy, and combat flows smoothly enough that your reactions become instinct. It has to feel this good because precision is the only thing standing between you and a crushing defeat. And while we're talking about shared experience, the multiplayer component deserves a nod. I could gush about it forever, but the message system here is brilliant. Between jokes like try finger butthole, a celebration after a boss, warnings before traps, it all reinforces that you're part of a community, struggling alone but never truly fully alone. Of course, the NPCs deserve mention too. Characters like Blide, Iron Fist Alexander, and my personal favorite, Bok the Seamster, add personality and warmth to a world otherwise defined by hardship. And honestly, part of why Elden Ring is in so many backlogs is because it breached containment. It's one thing being a Souls-like for die-hard fans, but this was a gaming event. Everyone was talking about it, even people who had never touched a From Software game before. Some bought it, hit a wall and bounced, others never even started, which brings us to the real point. Whether you persevere and finally conquer it, or decide to set it down forever and move on, there's no right answer. There's only the answer that's right for you. Hollow Knight might be the ultimate backlog game. It sits at the top of Backlogged and near the top of How Long to Beat, and that's no accident. This is a tough game. The kind where plenty of people dive in, love the vibe, then hit a boss that feels impossible and then quietly set it aside. Maybe for months, maybe forever. But part of why it's so common on backlogs is the sheer draw of its presentation. That hand-drawn art style, the animation, the way Hollow Nest oozes atmosphere, it pulls in people who might never usually touch a punishing Metroidvania. It's gorgeous enough to convince you to give it a shot, then hard enough to leave you staring at the screen wondering if you got it in you to continue. Add to that the hype and the constant word of mouth that's built around it over the years, and it's no wonder so many players felt compelled to pick it up, even if not all of them stuck with it. What makes it stand out is how well the world is constructed. Every zone has its own identity, whether it's the claustrophobic tension of Deep Nest or the melancholic rain falling over the City of Tears. Each location is distinct not just visually, but in how it changes the rhythm of exploration and combat. And speaking of combat, it hits the same highs. Every fight is deliberate, sharp, and brutal when you're learning, but when you finally win, it feels like you've earned it. Whether you're elegantly dueling with Hornet or quickly reacting to 3v1 against the Mantis Lords, the bosses are unique and unforgettable. The charm system deepens all of this too, letting you shape your playstyle in subtle but meaningful ways. More survivability, more magic, more mobility, adding variety and replayability on top of an already challenging core. The game really gets richer with the DLC Team Cherry released for the game too. They all deepen the world, expand the lore, and crank the difficulty up even further. All this content feels just as carefully put together as the base game. If anyone who set it aside early, the sheer amount of post-release content makes picking it back up again even more daunting. But if I had to boil it down, the thing that makes Hollow Knight stick in your head is the presentation. The art, the music, the soundscape. It's one of the most complete indie worlds I've ever seen, which might explain the backlog problem. The game is irresistible at first glance, even if it eventually asks more from you than you're ready to give. And like Elden Ring, it's not a game you can really sample in a sitting or two. The difference is Hollow Knight tends to show its hand faster. A few hours of navigating the maze-like caverns and testing yourself against some of the early game bosses will usually be enough to tell you if it's the kind of challenge you want to keep facing. If it clicks, you're in for one of the best Metroidvania experiences ever made, full stop. And if it doesn't, there's no shame in setting it aside. Either way, Hollow Nest leaves an impression that lingers long after you put the controller down. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt might be the final boss of Backlogged games. It's number 3 on Backlogged and number 1 on How Long to Beat, and for good reason. This is a huge game. It's dense, it's slow to start, and if you want to see the whole thing, expansions included, you're looking at easily 100+ hours of commitment. But it's also one of the best RPGs ever made. Geralt of Rivia isn't just an iconic character in gaming, he's a character you want to spend time with. He's dry, sarcastic, world-weary. He makes even the smallest quests entertaining. And speaking of quests, Witcher 3 is legendary because even the side quests feel meaningful. Some of the most memorable stories aren't in the main plot at all, but tucked away in small villages or hidden contracts, and they often carry more weight than the main objective in other RPGs. The world itself is massive and alive. You can just wander and lose yourself in the swamps, cities, or rolling fields, and it always feels grounded. Riding across the countryside with Roach, who, despite her occasional quirks, is a very good girl, is an experience in itself. And it's all held up by gorgeous presentation, the score with its eerie chants and folk instruments, the voice acting that makes the cast of characters unforgettable. The combat though, it's a bit divisive. Swinging swords around a normal difficulty can feel a little clunky, but here's the thing, Witcher 3 actually gets better the harder you play it. On harder difficulties, suddenly you can't just button mash your way through. You need to prepare using oils and potions and using your signs in smart ways. Monster contracts become these immersive little rituals, researching the creature, mixing the right concoctions, and heading out into the wild feeling like an actual Witcher. And that's the key to Witcher 3, you have to meet it on its level. The more you immerse yourself, the more you get out of it. Lean into its systems, experiment with decoctions, play some Gwent, live in its world. That's where the magic happens. The catch is, it takes a long time to really click. For me, it wasn't until after the Bloody Baron questline that I felt fully hooked, and that's hours into the game. But after that, the characters really start to shine, the story finds its momentum, and suddenly it becomes hard to put down. And if the base game wasn't enough, it has two of the best expansions in gaming history. Hearts of Stone is a tight, brilliantly written little tale, while Blood and Wine is basically an entire new game, and honestly better than most actual RPGs. And that's the thing, The Witcher 3 is so big, so talked about, so culturally present. Between the hype around the game itself, the mainstream push from the Witcher Netflix series, at this point you've either played it or it's sitting in your backlog. There's almost no one left who hasn't at least heard of it. And I'll be honest, for the longest time it sat in my backlog too. I picked it up, set it aside, promised myself I'd come back to it someday, and eventually I did. And I'm grateful I kept that promise, because Witcher 3 isn't just another game you cross off your list. It's an experience that stays with you. If I hadn't held onto it in my backlog, I might have never seen it all the way through, but finishing it was unforgettable. And that, more than anything, is why I think backlogs matter. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. I've covered a bunch of the most infamous backlog games here, but what about you guys? Are any of these sitting on your shelf waiting for someday? Or maybe you finally pushed through one and ended up being unforgettable? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. And hey, if you got a game you think is on the backlog of far too many people, drop that in the comments too. I might cover it in a future video. Until then, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.